Hi, boys and girls, and welcome to another edition of Snack Time with a Dollop of Read Aloud. Holy smokes, yesterday was an exciting read. We're going to continue again with Number the Stars by Lois Lowry, with permission granted by Houghton Mifflin Publishing for me to be able to share this with you. But I almost couldn't wait to get into it, so I had to remember to say that real quick. I couldn't believe it. How exciting. Ellen's parents have now joined them. And I was looking at some of your comments from yesterday about what your thoughts were about Aunt Bertie's funeral. Now, we know that Great Aunt Bertie, as we found out in yesterday's chapter, that she didn't really exist. So what we were trying to do is I left you with the question, what were they having this funeral for? We remember that there were just kind of like random people showing up, a mother and a baby, a couple, an older man, and then all of a sudden, Ellen's parents, who we haven't seen since earlier in the book. What do you think is the purpose of Great Aunt Bertie's funeral? Now, some of you were pretty close. Some of you said that you thought it was maybe a secret gathering. And I think as we read, you'll discover that you were actually really close to hitting it on the head, that you were really close to getting it right. So let's see if your predictions were correct as we read chapter 10, Let Us Open the Casket. You are all here now, Uncle Heinrich said, looking around the living room. So I must go. Annemarie stood in the wide doorway looking in from the hall. The baby slept now, and in its mother's Annemarie stood in the wide doorway looking in from the hall. The baby slept now, and its mother looked tired. Her husband sat beside her, his arms across her shoulders. The old man's head was still bent. Peter sat alone, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. It was clear that he was deep in thought. On the sofa, Ellen sat between her parents, one hand clasped tightly in her mother's. She looked up at Annemarie but didn't smile. Annemarie felt a surge of sadness. The bond of their friendship had not been broken, but it was as if Ellen had moved now into a different world, the world of her own family and whatever lay ahead for them. The elderly, bearded man looked up suddenly as Uncle Heinrich prepared to go. God keep you safe, he said in a firm but quiet voice. Heinrich nodded. God will keep us all safe, he replied. Then he turned and left the room. A moment later, Annemarie heard him leave the house. It's kind of a weird goodbye. And it has to do with staying safe, so I have to wonder yet again, what is going on at Uncle Heinrich's house? Mama brought the teapot from the kitchen and a tray of cups. Annemarie helped her pass the cups around. Still, no one spoke. Annemarie, Mama whispered in the hallway, you may go to bed if you want to. It is very late. Annemarie shook her head, but she was so tired. She could see that Ellen was tired as well. Her friend's head was leaning against her mother's shoulders, and her eyes closed every now and then. Finally, Annemarie went to the empty rocking chair in the corner of the living room and curled there with her head against its soft, padded back. She dozed. She was startled from her half-sleep by the sudden sweep of headlights through the sheer curtains and across the room as a car pulled up outside. Car doors slammed. Everyone in the room tensed, and no one spoke. She heard it as if it was a recurring nightmare, the pounding on the door and then the heavy, frighteningly familiar staccato of boots on the kitchen floor. Remember, the staccato is the heavy footsteps. The woman with the baby gasped and began suddenly to weep. The male accented voice from the kitchen was loud. We have observed, he said, that an unusual number of people have gathered at this house tonight. What is the explanation? There has been a death, Mama's voice replied calmly. It is always our custom to gather and pay our respects when a family member dies. I am sure you are familiar with our customs. One of the officers pushed Mama ahead of him from the kitchen and entered the living room. There were others behind him. They filled the wide doorways. As always, their boots gleamed, their guns, their helmets, all of them gleamed in the candlelight. Annemarie watched as the man's eyes moved around the room. He's looking for something. He looked for a long time at the casket. A casket is another word for a coffin. Then he moved his gaze, focusing on each person in turn. Excuse me. When his eyes reached her, she looked back at him steadily. "Who died?" he asked. No one answered. They watched Annemarie, and she realized that the officer was directing the question for her. Now she knew for certain what Uncle Heinrich had meant when he had talked to her in the barn. To be brave came more easily if you knew nothing. She swallowed. "My great-aunt Birte," she lied in a firm voice. The officer moved forward suddenly across the room to the casket. He placed one gloved hand on the lid. "Poor great-aunt Birte," he said in a condescending voice. "I do know your customs," he said, turning his gaze towards Mama, who stood in the doorway. "And I know it is custom to pay one's respects by looking your loved one in the face. It seems odd to me that you have a closed coffin in front of you, and this coffin is closed so tightly." His hand was a fist as he rubbed it across the edge of the polished lid. "Why is it not open?" he demanded. "Let us open it and take a good look at your poor great-aunt Birte." Annemarie saw Peter across the room stiffen in his chair. He lifted his chin and reached slowly with one hand to his side. Mama walked quickly across the room directly to the casket, directly to the officer. "You're right," she said. "The doctor said it should be closed because Aunt Birte died of typhus. And he said there was still a chance of the germs in there, that someone could get sick. It could still be dangerous." But what does he know? He's only a country doctor, and an old man at that. Surely typhus germs won't linger in a dead person. And dear Aunt Birte, I've been longing to see her face and to kiss her goodbye. Of course we will open the casket. I'm glad you suggested. With a swift motion, the Nazi soldier slapped Mama across the face. She staggered backwards, a white mark on her cheek darkened. "You foolish woman, to think we have any interest in seeing the body of your deceased aunt. Open it after we leave." With one gloved thumb, he pressed out the candle into darkness. The hot wax spattered on the table. "Put out all these candles or pull the curtains closed." Then he strode to the doorway and left the room. Motionless, silent, one hand to her cheek, Mama listened. They all listened as the uniformed men left the house. In a moment, they heard the car doors, the sound of its engine, and finally they heard it drive away. "Mama!" Annemarie cried. Her mother shook her head quickly and glanced at the open window, covered only by the sheer curtains. Annemarie understood. There might still be soldiers outside. They might still be watching, listening. Peter stood and drew the dark curtains across the windows. He relit the extinguished candle. Then he reached for the old Bible that had always been there on the mantel. He opened it quickly and said, "I will read a psalm." His eyes turned to the edge he had opened at random, and he began to read in a strong voice. "Oh, praise the Lord! How good it is to sing psalms to our God! How pleasant to praise him! The Lord is rebuilding Jerusalem. He gathers in the scattered sons of Israel. It is he who heals the broken spirit and binds up their wounds. He who numbers the stars one by one." Oh, just got chills. Mama sat down and listened. Gradually, they each began to relax. Annemarie could see the old man across the room moving his lips as Peter read. He knew the ancient psalm by heart. Annemarie didn't. The words were unfamiliar to her, and she tried to listen, tried to understand, tried to forget the war and the Nazis, tried not to cry, tried to be brave. The night breeze moved the dark curtains at the open windows. Outside, she knew, the sky was speckled with stars. How could anyone number them one by one, as the psalm said? There were too many. The sky was just too big. Ellen had said that her mother was frightened of the ocean, that it was too cold and too big. The sky was too, thought Annemarie. The whole world was too big, too cold, too cruel. Peter read on in his firm voice, though it was clear he was tired. Long minutes passed. They felt like hours. Finally, still reading, he moved quietly to the window. He closed the Bible and listened to the quiet night. Then he looked around the room. Now, he said, it is time. First he opened the windows. Then he went to the casket and opened the lid. Oh, the story ends there. Or not the story, the chapter. Oh my gosh. That is such an amazing chapter. So, something happened. Annemarie finally understood why it's better to know just bits and pieces of the whole story and not the whole story when you are doing something that could be potentially dangerous. Something going on. Something is happening. Something that could be dangerous to the Johansson family, to Peter Nielsen, to Ellen and the Rosens, and to the random people that are just waiting in Uncle Heinrich's house. Something is happening now. We still have yet to find out what's in the casket. We will have to wait for Monday to find out. Try as you might. But what I want you to think about, and I want you to make a prediction, what is about to happen? What do you think will happen next? If you remember, Peter said, now, he said, it is time. Time for what? So that's what I want you to think about. What is it time for? And will Annemarie have to be brave again? All right, boys and girls, I hope you enjoyed this exciting chapter of Number the Stars. We have a few more to go. We'll be finishing it early next week, and we'll be starting our next read aloud. But we are not rushing through the final chapters of Number the Stars. It is just that good. Okay. So again, I would love for you to answer that question. What do you think is going to happen next? Do you think Annemarie is going to need to be brave one more time? I hope to see you at Class Share today at 11. And as always, I miss you. I love you. Stay safe. Bye, guys.